Wachi. I am one of the Uplift supporters here at UND. I'm also a commercial aviation and aviation safety major here at also at UND Aerospace. So I have the privilege of moderating the Collegiate Student Aviation panel. So these are your future pilots, safety professionals, you know, people in the aviation professionals of tomorrow. So, and in particular, this generation, Generation Z, you have to think, we lived in a post 9/11 world. Our coming of age came from like during the worst recession in US history, and started college during, well, a global pandemic. So getting that perspective out, you know, how does that affect our perceptions of mental health? How does our upbringing have an effect on how we perceive that? And so to start, let's start with some introductions going down the line. So your name, what your school and major, as well as like your hometown.
I can start. Hello, everyone. My name is Lila. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm from Western Michigan University. I did not grow up in Michigan. I'm from just south of Indianapolis, so I would see the FedEx planes fly in and out over my house all the time. I grew up in an aviation-positive household, but I am the first current living member of my family to be a pilot. My grandfather was a pilot for North Central, but very sadly died in a plane crash, single pilot plane crash when my mom was 2. So let's say it was an interesting dinner conversation when I said I want to be a professional pilot one day. But I am very excited to be here and to talk to you all about what it means to be a student pilot right now and what it means to be your future employers or employees.
Hey everybody, I'm Tanner Way with Southern Illinois University. I'm Dr. Miller's undergraduate research assistant. Right now, just recently took that position. Junior, so getting close to the finish line. It's been a little bit of a process getting through, you know. Started out wearing some masks, flying some airplanes, and we're moving, hopping right along, getting quick with it, and getting closer to the end. So we're just really looking forward to it. And you asked us to talk a little bit about our hometown. So I was born and raised in rural western Kentucky, I might add. I'm sure most of y'all noticed I wasn't quite from around here by my accent, but no. Small town. Growing up, we lived the type of life, you know, if you run outside and you scrape your knee, you know, your dad would say, oh, why don't you just rub some dirt in it, you know, just get up and you're fine, you're fine. So needless to say, we didn't talk about mental health or anything like that. So it's definitely interesting to move towards a environment where everyone, you know, talks about it and it's so open and accepting and moving towards definitely the solution to a problem we have in this industry. So I'll pass it on to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carson Calhoun.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carson Calhoun. I'm a sophomore here at the University of North Dakota, and I'm a commercial aviation major as well as a peer supporter. I grew up in Eastern Oregon until I was about 10 years old, and then during the oil boom, moved out to western, rural North Dakota. Spent about the last 10 years of my life here in a small town called Garrison and White Shield. I finished out my high school there, did some private pilot training, and graduated from White Shield High School, a graduate class of 11. And so it's safe to say I've seen a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of diversity growing up. And I'm hoping to apply the skills and the knowledge that I've learned to supporting my peers.
Hello, everyone. My name is Matthew Colwine. I am a second-year student here at UND, and I am a commercial aviation and aviation safety and operations major. I grew up in Woodbury, Minnesota. That's about 15 minutes east of St. Paul. And my family, we've always been very, mental health positive. They've always been very supportive of me, and I hope that I can, share my viewpoint with that and have a good discussion here.
So I want to go back to like our upbringing and everything like that. So you guys definitely had like mentioned about like your upbringing and how like mental health was talked about. But could we go more into depth with that, more or less about like, how did our peers have those kinds of perceptions of mental health? Were they negative? Were they positive? And in general, like how was the topic of mental health, has evolved throughout our like coming of age? Anyone want to start?
I mean, I think we joke about it, but we're the ADHD diagnosed generation. And so I think that really kicked things off from a very young age. I think I have always been able to talk about my mental health with my peers, and I think it has always been a very positive conversation, in part with the internet, because when you talk about, depression among your peers, you can Google it and figure out what depression is and what it really is and what it means to support your friend with depression. It does not mean, oh my gosh, you're weird, like I'm gonna exile you. And now even more, even when, we were going through middle school and high school, we didn't, have a ton of technology, but I mean, even if you talk about like TikTok today, a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, I have ADHD, I figured it out on TikTok. So I think maybe we have swung from going, absolutely nothing to like it being a very large part about what we in our generation talks about nowadays.
Yeah, so I like what you mentioned about, we live in an age of information. We have a supercomputer, most of us anyways have a supercomputer sitting right there in our pocket. It can do just about anything you program it to do, and certainly you can find anything that you want to learn. And I think just the fact that we have the ability to access this, and we have this just overwhelm of information right at our fingertips, I think that gives us a different perspective. It gives us the know-how, whereas maybe in the past we didn't talk about it as much because we didn't know as much. So I think with education comes a certain responsibility. If you have the ability to take action, right, you have the responsibility to take action. So that's just my kind of 2 cents on that.
So I think something for our generation at least, with the last few years with COVID happening and us happening to have these supercomputers in our pocket, I was a junior in high school, I remember being locked in my room pretty much, doing everything I could to try and keep that connection with the outside world. But what COVID really revealed to us is that, hey, there's a lot of other people out here who feel these same things, and you're not alone if you're ever going through something. And so I think going through the pandemic and being at such a crucial age, junior, senior in high school, or a freshman, sophomore in college, just being in that age range when the pandemic happened and when we had that realization that social media and the internet can be such a useful tool when it is used in moderation, I think that opened up a lot of doors for talking about mental health.
I'm going to take a step back from the whole internet discussion here for a moment and relate back to my family and my upbringing. Elementary school, middle school, high school, it wasn't something, at least for me, that was really talked about all that much. You always had the people that were open about it, and that's fantastic. But you also had people on the other side of the coin that really didn't want to have anything to do with it. Their family tradition was don't talk about it. As maybe their last generation grew up like that, and they were born into that as well. But as we progressed through our childhood and into high school, eventually into college, we started developing our own kind of viewpoints on these things. Thanks to the internet, having viewpoints outside of just our household that we could build off of and become our own individual. And especially for me, I grew up in a very mental health, positive, mental health centric family. But coming to college, I really became my own person. I started, learning about all these other things, seeing people talk openly about it. And it's a totally new culture here. And I think that's why Uplift and these programs as a whole are so beneficial here, because we're willing to have this discussion now. And just being able to grow up and become your own person in that sense is very crucial to this as well.
So you guys all, a lot of you talked about social media and how it's a community, right? I'm also a communication major, so I'm kind of a nerd at this too. But a lot of times social media also has that bad light on it. Could anybody want to put a light on that, just talking about instant gratification or things like that,
Yeah, I'll start with this and then move it along here. The internet and social media, like most things in this world, it's inherently neutral. It's neither good nor bad. It's what we do with it. And social media in particular, I mean, you see people posting about their perfect lives of someone sitting at a beach, with a drink, just relaxing, having a good time. And when in reality, they could be having the worst vacation ever, family problems or whatever. So we don't really see the full side of the coin. But we always think, hey, their life is so much better than mine. Mine must suck. And that's one negative thing about social media in that aspect. But on the other side of the coin, it can be such a resource, being able to connect with people who have similar problems that you're going through, being able to talk with peers and saying, hey, I understand what you're going through. There's support groups for it online, and those have varying degrees of success depending on stuff like fear mongering, worst case scenarios, etc. And yeah, that's all I have.
I think to just hit on what Matthew just said, I grew up in a household that thought most things in life were inherently not good or bad. It was just how you wanted to use it. And I think everything in moderation can be good. And especially when it comes to social media and the internet and that ability to reach out, make connections, and reconnect with family or friends, there's so much potential to do good things with the internet and with social media that if you use it on a positive light and you use it in moderation, it's a good thing.
So piggybacking off of what you said, for every good thing that comes out and comes into this world, there's the flip side of that coin where it can be utilized as a weapon, right? So social media can bring us all together, absolutely. I can connect on social media probably with everyone in this room. They probably have some sort of social media. So that, that's a positive, right? Flip that coin over. You now have a tool. You can find anybody, see anybody, and say whatever you want and do whatever you want sitting right behind the screen. So we can probably all say that that's impacted us as well. Just wanted to play devil's advocate there for a minute.
So I real quick want to bring this back into what specifically applies to our generation and even more specifically aviation, is that we have an inherent tool to show representation that has never been seen before on any level. I can get on my phone right now and connect with thousands of other female pilots when I sometimes am the only female in my class. Holy crap, that is powerful. To go, I am seen, I am valued, there are other people out there like me. And that can be used as an incredible, tool to recruit new pilots of, new backgrounds and of new education levels we have never seen before. But like these gentlemen all said, it has its pros and cons.
So to shift gears a little bit, so in terms of our perceptions of mental health within this generation, are they different? And in many, compared to past generations, what is your opinion on that?
I'm laughing right now. Because much like some of y'all have had the experience of, I would go, Dad, I don't want to go to school tomorrow, and he would go, too bad, I don't want to go to work. And I was like, no, Dad, I'm isolated alone, I don't have any friends, and he's like, too bad, I have to go to work. I love this man with my whole heart. But it is of a different type of conversation. I think we are more open about it because we've had more exposure of it through social media. And through that exposure, I have been able to influence some of the people around me to being more open and accepting of other people who may have, different levels of mental health, illness, and just practicing good mental health, taking care of yourself. It's just like exercise. You have to take care of your brain like you take care of the rest of your body, and opening up that conversation of being like, hey, maybe we should, during COVID, go on family walks because that's good for our brains, getting outside, keeping active, staying connected with each other outside of us all sitting in our living room on our computers staring at each other for 8 hours a day while we're doing work.
And I think I kind of spoke to this a little bit when I was doing my introduction, so I don't want to beat a dead horse, but we live in an age of information, right? And I think just the fact that we have all this research and all this data to back up, these hypotheses that we probably had for years, but now that we have that and, the influence of social media, I think it's inherent that we talk about it, so.
I think, especially for our generation, just within the last 8 or so years, it's gotten easier because people have started talking about it on levels that past generations haven't ever gotten to. And so I know personally, I've had family members and I've had friends, and I've seen it in my community, both here at UND and before I came to college. It's a real thing, and when people can see that and they can start to talk about it, it makes it a lot easier to address the problem and start to prevent instead of react.
So kind of going off of what Tanner said for a moment, regarding the previous generations, they didn't have the kind of resources that we have now. They didn't have the internet. They couldn't say, hey, I think I might have this. I want to, to see someone about it and get help. They were stuck to their little bubble, and they didn't want to reach out any further, and often they couldn't. And also, this is still there's still a lot of research going into this. This is still an ongoing process within the community where we're still learning things. And 30, 40, 50 years ago, it just wasn't on the forefront of the community yet. It wasn't something people talked about. And that's just the culture back then. And we're making this change now, and that is incredibly important.
That conversation, especially in our generation, is much more open than previous generations. And so now to shift gears onto this new question, being in the aviation industry, being in a collegiate flight school, collegiate aviation program, et cetera, has your perceptions of mental health changed since being in the aviation industry, being a pilot or air traffic controller?
So I guess I can start out with this. I had my mental health challenges before I went to get my medical, and I did all the research, and I came to the doctor's office, with a packet of information, and I walked out there with my medical, and kind of going off of that, it's very important to do research in that sense, but kind of moving forward, in aviation, it's not something that we want to talk about. In a weird sense, we almost took a step back, going into an aviation program, because people, it's still very much a taboo thing. That's something we're very hoping to kind of influence here, and that's incredibly crucial to this community. And I guess the key thing is having the discussion about it, and hopefully, changing that coin from something that we don't want to talk about to something we want to talk about even more than the regular community. It's not in aviation, because it's more so, even more crucial here than elsewhere.
I think when it comes to the aviation industry, when as a culture we start to look at it as, hey, this is as important as our safety culture, and we need to start to address it at the root. So when there's a problem in a safety environment, you don't want to just hide that problem under the rug and say, oh, I just don't want to look at it, and then let that develop into a larger problem. So we need to have that same approach when it comes to mental health. And I think since I've gotten into aviation, which has only been just under 2 years, I've seen, at least among my peers, that shift into, hey, I know you just went through something. Let's address this problem before it develops into something much worse. And so I think when we can start to prioritize our mental health as important as our safety culture and just the operational safety within a university or within an airline, I think when we get to that level of mental health being a priority is when it'll start to get a lot easier even easier to have these conversations.
So I like what you said. I like that a lot. And you look at whenever you ignore problems, you have latent errors that build up, and you see reasons, Swiss cheese model, and all the holes align, and then you've got the active error, and then you have an accident, right? So I think mitigation tactics are incredibly important when you look at these types of issues. But getting back to your question, before I entered a 141 environment, I was Part 61, just flying for leisure. Why? Because it's fun. I wanted to go to school to be a doctor. I was like, I don't want to, fly for a career or whatever. Anyways, one day I woke up. I was like, you know what? I'm going to give this thing a go. So, moving forwards towards a Part 141 environment, it's intense, it's fixed, it's very rigid. There's a divide there. And you take a high performer, right? These people haven't been challenged, during high school. Everything was easy, didn't have to study, and you throw them in a pit with the same exact people, right? These high performers, go-getters, they're having to try in a 141 environment, And I think some of that is where the stress comes from, right? It's the realization that life's not easy. It's going to get tough. And you chose a pretty tough path, going into aviation. So we look at what can we do to try to mitigate that stress and give these students and these collegiate aviators and even aviators in their career tactics to calm down, tactics to realize everything's okay. It's not a problem that I made a mistake. I can, get better from learning from that. And we don't want to lull on it. And we have to teach ourselves and teach our peers how to be resilient.
I second everything these gentlemen said. They basically took all the words out of my mouth. The only thing that I can think to add is that I believe, and a lot of the people that I work with believe that people are more than their professions. And I know as pilots, it is very hard to get this through our very thick heads. It's also very hard for doctors and some of these other very high-performing, very stressful jobs, is that people are more important than their profession. So at the end of the day, you have to take care of you, or else you're not going to be flying that airplane one way or another. You are more important being on this earth than it is that you fly that airplane. And I think that that's something that we are grappling with as students, we're grappling with as faculty, and we're trying to figure out how to support our students to let them know, like, it's cool to be a pilot. We've all seen Top Gun. It is really cool to be a pilot. But you are just as cool as a human if you're down on the ground doing something else. If you're in, management, if you're in the business side of aviation, if you're in sales, if you're in maintenance, you don't have to be flying the plane to be that cool person.
So I just want to add something once more before we move on to the next question. Was it Major? I believe she was talking about energy drinks and candy bars, right? Was that you? Okay, I thought so. Let me tell you what, that's real, okay?
Second.
Trust me. Everybody up here, we see it every day. And, we want to push the importance of healthy body, healthy mind. It's true. When you eat better, you feel better. Just try it. Load up a bunch of candy bars and, get that sugar high and crash. Then we'll talk, all right? No.
All right. Yeah, I can second the caffeine. I'm on 3 cups of coffee right now in the last 2 hours. But going more into depth with into collegiate flight training, what type of struggles, and this could be school specific as well, what type of struggles do you see within your peers and within yourself in a collegiate flight program? This is as you said, this is a very stressful environment. We are held to the standards of airline pilots. We are expected to do things like call outs, checklists, memory items, flow patterns, all of that jazz. And so what type of struggles do you see within yourself and within others?
I can kick this off. This is okay. Oh my gosh, it's incredibly hard. I just no filter. It is extremely hard, and every other flight student out there will agree with me. We are college kids. So we are living on our own for the first time. I am 4.5 hours away from my mom. There is no calling home to be like, hey mom, you got to come get me. I need a night at home with my dogs. That's just not a reality. We are college kids. I second semester freshman year, I was taking all of my classes online. So I got 1 semester of normal college, quote unquote, and then my senior year, it's finally come back. So we are COVID college kids, and then we are COVID college pilot kids. which means that we put an undue amount of pressure on ourselves. We are in, like Tanner said, a very rigid program that has expectations that are very high of us, which we fully consented to being in, but man, is it hard. And then you add in all the other life struggles on top of that. You've got y'all up north can agree with me, it is sunny like 3 hours outside, maybe. It's dark all the time. You're like, I am hardly making friends. It's really hard to stay engaged in classes. I mean, the reality of it is that it is just really tough. And I think at the end of the day, most of us end up leaning on each other. Some of my favorite moments from college and the moments that have gotten me through college has been sitting in the dining hall, eating ice cream, going, man, I haven't started that 5-page paper yet. And then person next to me going, we had a 5-page paper due. Or, sitting, just, right? I just did it, what day is today? Wednesday? Monday, I was sitting in a meeting. I run our aviation student council, and I was like, okay, y'all, we've got about 20 minutes left. I've got 2 options. What do we want to do? And they just stared at me, and I was like, do you want to go home? And they were like, I said, so we're going to go home. You're going to get that little bit of extra rest. So I think really it takes a community to get one person, through this school. And I think at Western, we're very blessed to have a very tight-knit community, and I hope to hear the same from these gentlemen as well.
So kind of going off of that, of what Tanner said earlier about how we're all overachievers in some aspect, I think beyond just obvious stuff like stage checks, papers, deadlines, there's another layer of this within our peers as well, and that is we feel like we have to keep up with our peers. So often someone will get ahead on a flight course here, or you'll get behind, and then you feel like there's a pressure you have to keep up with that as well. And I think that can play a very big role, staying with our class and along those lines as well. And then additionally, going back to the more tangible aspect of it, and that is the papers and whatnot. I remember my freshman year here at UND, it was Econ 210. And I absolutely bombed one of my tests. I got a D in it, and I was like, oh my God, this never happened to me before. And the stresses of freshman year college, they go through a lot because they are being hit hard with the reality, this is not high school, we can't breathe through this anymore. This is real. And I am 4.5 hours away from my parents. I can't do anything. I am here. I am, I have a job. I have to drive to work. My car is broken. I have to go, fix my car. And all these things add up and up and up. And eventually you're like, well, what do I do? And, it's important, have a friend. I wouldn't have gotten anywhere freshman year without my roommate that I could talk to. And, and I'm still, my roommate in my apartment now, we are, so close. And you need someone to be there with you to go through the struggles together, because it's not something you can do alone.
Kind of adding on to that real quick, I've said this to a couple of y'all in the room real quick here, but I'm going to walk in April. I'm a senior, and my flight instructor, his name is Joe. Joe's also going to walk in April. Joe is my flight instructor. He's like 3 or 4 certs ahead of me. It is very hard not to compare yourself to the people you're with, but I am very lucky that people like Joe go, hey, I'm just going to teach you what not to do because I did it all wrong, and I'm going to teach you off of my mistakes. And I'm very blessed that we do have a culture that is not comparative in that way, that is very let me hand down my knowledge to you because I've been through it. Let me help you. So big shout out for Joe for being awesome and not making me feel bad about that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Quick. So kind of back off of what he said. You really do have to rely on your peers, but somebody else who has, at least at my time here at UND, been a big help. I want to shout out the faculty of all the UND Aerospace professors. They've been really helpful whenever I have a deadline that I know is coming up and I've got personal commitments. I've got deadlines for other classes that I'm trying to make. Communicating with them, they've all been extremely understanding. I haven't had a bad experience with a professor yet. And I think communicating with both your peers, your professors, your flight instructor, it's such a crucial part that helps mitigate the problems that come with missing these deadlines, not turning in the perfect PowerPoint, or not doing things the way you want to get it done.
you hit a good point there, communication. I mean, just head on the nail on that one. We are in an industry where communication is extremely, extremely important, and clear communication and clear commands and directions. So I think it's important for institutions to be very clear and have a very clear directive and chain of command, and you just need to know exactly what you need to do, right? And that's why I'm thankful at SIU we have this family of aviation professionals. I mean, really, we do. So I'm thankful for that. But the point I wanted to make was, excuse me, again, communication, of course. So I'll pass it back to you.
All right, and you know, someone in the Google form mentioned this, and I was actually going to mention this as well. So we're in this post-COVID era of the aviation industry. Rapid hiring, you know, pilots are getting hired left and right. CFIs are leaving every week, and we have to get reassigned and reassigned and reassigned. But in our perspective, you know, how does this current industry conditions affect, you know, our well-being as a pilot? What kind of pressures are we put upon? You know, is it the get to the airlines, get to the airlines, get to the airlines, or are we going to take our time and, you know, actually, you know, grasp everything we need to know as a pilot?
It is absolutely 100% get to the airlines as soon as possible. I mean, I did not come from an airline family. I knew absolutely nothing walking in the door. And I was taught very early on, the sooner you get to your dream airline, the sooner you get that seniority number, the better quality of life you had. There is no benefit for taking longer. What kind of a message does that send to our young professionals? That says you work as hard as possible, you work 24/7, your sole focus is your aviation career, because you are nothing if you are not a high seniority number very young, because you don't have a quality of life very young. And that's not the message we need to be telling, you know, our students. Everyone has their own, you know, path. Everyone has their own time of doing things. Everyone learns at different paces. You know, there are some people that struggle in the beginning but then get it really quick at the end, and there are people that, you know, are really great in the beginning and, you know, struggle towards the end of flight courses. Everyone has their own path. And that's not to say that the airlines are structured wrong, because I completely get the seniority thing. But I think we do need to emphasize that there is a lot to be gained right now as students. There's a lot of mistakes we can make right now as students. There's a lot of things we can learn right now as students that would absolutely be, you know, fireable offenses when we get to the airline. We just talked about that scenario at United. You know, if you fail those, you know, 2 checks, like, that's it. You're not going to have, you know, your chief flight person sitting down going, hey, we want you to succeed. These are your tools. We'll give you, you know, 3-4 more chances until, you know, you're out of here. We really care and want to pour into you, because those, you know, by the time, you know, you're at those airline levels, like, you are expected to perform as an employee, not a student. So I definitely think there is a lot of pressure to get up there, but I think we also need to take a step back and go, wait a minute, I'm a college kid. Like, there is no more college after this. Like, in master's degrees, you don't get the chance to go out and, like, party with frats. It's not how that works. But yeah, I guess what I'm saying is that there needs to be an emphasis on taking your time and enjoy being a student, and to learn as much as you can now.
So, you know, during private training, you learn about get-there-itis. We've all heard get-there-itis, right? The same is true, I'm afraid, in the industry. I think we need to be very careful about this push of getting people to the airlines as fast as possible, because we certainly don't want to, you know, compromise safety at any point. So I think it's very important that we all take a step back, we look at ourselves, and make sure that we are in tip-top shape, right? But one point I wanted to make, just real quick, you know, pilots, I think we're conditioned, you know, PIC, pilot in command, right? Being in charge. And whenever there are factors outside of your control, I think we get a little crazy, right? I don't know about you, but I can't control the weather. If you do, see me after we get done. I want to have a conversation. No. But, you know, that can wig us out a little bit. We can't control the weather. We can't control plane availability, instructor availability. And all of these are stressors that we as collegiate aviators face. You know, so as faculty and industry advisors, we just ask that you keep that in mind, that is a stressor that we do deal with and a pressure that we feel from a collegiate aviation side.
So I think as aviation students, we all, in some way or another, are never happy with where we are in the moment. We're always looking at where we want to be, you know, next semester, in a year, in 2 years, in a decade. We're always planning ahead. I remember when I got my PPL when I was 18, Part 61. I was like, gosh, this is great. I've made it. I am a pilot. And then thinking, okay, now I want to get my instrument rating. Then that is it. Then I'm cool. Like then it's worth it. And then you get that. And now I'm just thinking about commercial. You need to take the time to enjoy where you are now. And right now, this whole semester, I've been just building hours towards my commercial. I've just been being a pilot, you know, sitting there solo at night, me and my airplane in traffic control. And that's when you really start, you know, to enjoy the moment, you know. And that is something we all need to do. You know, reflect on where how hard we've worked to get where we are now, and, you know, be proud of ourselves. And because so often we find ourselves, you know, just craving for the next thing.
I guess real quick, just to hit on what all these guys said up here, just take the time to reflect on how far you've come and be proud of yourself, because, I mean, there's such a small population of collegiate aviators, and to be doing what we're doing and on the path going where we're going, we're going to make it. And as long as we're working hard and we're goal-driven, we're going to get to where we want to be one way or another. And so if there's a pandemic that hits and it takes another 8 years to get where you want to get, then that's just the way it was supposed to be. But rushing and worrying about things that you can't control is only going to hurt your performance.
As my dad would say, we get there when we get there. Suck it up, kid. Literally. And that's the biggest thing is patience, right? And I think at this age, we want to get to that next path in life real fast, because this is all we see. All we see is literally the future. So changing gears just a little bit. So from the collegiate aviation student perspective, you know, whether that is yourself, your peers, you know, this mental illness, mental health stigma within our industry, is that prevalent in our communities, in our school communities, in our university communities? You know, you can speak on behalf of, you know, whatever school you represent.
Yes, it is. I have the very incredible opportunity to do undergraduate research for my honors college thesis, and essentially what I'm studying is what our Western pilots think. What do they think about the mental health, you know, regulations? What do they think about mental health in general? And what are the decisions they are making based off of it? I have about half the survey results I need. I'm about a month into it, and I can say that it is absolutely still prevalent. And you know, the collegiate world, you know, students are like, I absolutely, under no circumstances, am going to see a mental health provider. You know, you will, you know, take me there in a casket, is essentially what they're saying. They're saying that it's heartbreaking.
I think it's still extremely prevalent in our day and age, even in our age group. How we're going to approach that is we're just going to keep talking about it, and over time we will build that trust between entities like a peer support program and the student body. And like Dr. Ken Carlson was saying earlier with the 110-100 rule, I firmly believe in that, and I believe that if we can just do the best we can with each individual case, over time we will build that trust.
You know, I do want to point out, I think even in the past 5-10 years, the stigma within college aviation has gotten so much better. You know, this generation and even late last generation has made tremendous progress, and we're building off of that. We aren't starting from scratch here, and I think we just need to keep working on the stigma, keep encouraging people to speak up, and keep changing that mindset, and that's really the best we can do.
Absolutely. I think you all hit it perfectly there. The more we talk about it, the more awareness we have in advocation and education, more importantly, the more we can disseminate this and provide this recurring theme that it's okay to not be okay. As long as you're not giving up on your dreams, we want you to be healthy, we want you to have a healthy body and a healthy mind. You need to implement these themes, and they need to be recurring, and the more frequent they are, I think the deeper it's going to root itself inside of not only collegiate aviation, but inside the industry as well.
All right, so the next question that I would ask you guys is, we have this stigma in our communities, and so what types of methods besides like the ones that we've seen today, peer support programs, the Resilience Project, CRAFT, what other types of methods do you think that would help destigmatize this culture, this around mental health, and especially in our communities as collegiate aviation students?
So just to hit on that real quick, I think that goes back to education. And, whenever we look at it from, I think, a policy perspective, there is a lot of gray area of what's going to happen to me. And I think the redefining that, clarifying that, and then disseminating that to our aviators would make a tremendous impact. You no longer have the fear over your head of, well, what's going to happen to me? And from a pilot's perspective, I can flip that coin around and say, well, you're not going to know unless you ask. That's why you need to get on the phone with your AME, and you guys need to have a conversation, right? So we see both sides of that, but definitely clarity, redefinition, education, and we're doing our part here today for advocacy.
I think it needs to come straight from the horse's mouth. I mean, I think there is a lot to be done with individual flight schools. I think there's a lot to be done with the FAA and talking about this. I mean, if I go and, share my notes with a kid at school, they're going to go, okay, cool. They're going to go home and forget everything I said. But if our, director of flight operations, if, an FAA representative comes up and says the same thing, they're going to go, oh, wow. I'd never heard that before. I'm going to go, I literally just told you, but okay. It needs to come from, those trusted superior people that hold the power of this information. And I don't think that there's any other way around it. I mean, a first officer only listens to the captain. Why would they listen to a passenger? It has to come from that superior person that has the ability to go, this is the truth, and I'm telling it to you right now.
So kind of going off of that, a lot of the stigma is definitely, rumors, fear-mongering. I mean, you don't hear about the success stories. You hear about, hey, this guy lost his career over this, and that is all we think about. We don't think about the thousands of people that got through it and did okay. And I know on the second day of our uplift training, we had a whole myth-busting session about rumors with the FAA and medicals and mental health and that whole area there. And I think now we're equipped to be able to help dispel those rumors the best we can. I don't know how many people are going to listen to us. Like you said, I would want to hear it straight from the horse's mouth as well. I mean, hopefully some people will listen to the supporters in that aspect. Some probably won't, and that's okay. And if my career was on the line, I would need to hear it, multiple times from a lot of sources before I start believing it, because, all it takes is one person to lie to me, and, if I believe them, then my career is done. So there's a lot of different people that need to be spreading the same message in that aspect to really hit home.
I think everything they hit on was really accurate, and hearing it from a more dependable and a higher source will make it more, or it'll be easier for you to accept that and want to go forward with that process. But what's really hard with the gray area that was described is case by case, it really does depend. So I think, we keep talking about it, we keep implementing it, we keep pushing it, and we try and get more definitions and more clear terms so we know what is acceptable and what is not.
That gray area is definitely a very scary area for any pilot. But going into this last question before I leave it to the audience to ask the panel, in the future when we become the leaders in this industry, so when you guys are retired, what types of changes would you want to see in the industry regarding mental health and regulatory medicine, aviation medicine?
I guess for me, it just comes down to like people over professions. I would really love to see a holistic approach to every person, regardless of what their dream job was, or what their life goal is, if it is to be a pilot or whatnot. There is a safety factor of it, and we have well established that here today. But I think there is also room to be more accepting of humans being humans and of people being people. I guess I don't have any specific answers because I am not a regulatory body, nor have I thought of my dream regulations. I may think of that tonight. But I do think that we do have a lot of room to grow and be more accepting and welcoming of each other and how we show up no matter what our dream job is.
I think something moving forward, and I've seen it a lot around UND, and I love the direction we're taking, and I hope we keep moving in that direction. Just seeing that safety of that culture of mental health being pushed as hard as that culture of safety, because they really are hand in hand, and a mentally ill pilot is just as dangerous as a physically ill pilot.
Going off of what everyone has said so far, have it be, people first, pilot second. We are still humans. We still have emotions, and we still go through all these things. And helping, continuing to reduce that stigma, making it something we talk about, clarifying things further, so we know where to look. Like pilots, we think in black and white. We have to switch on or switch off, and so having gray areas, I'd say, makes us a little bit uncomfortable.
When you look at policy, our regulatory body doesn't change policy to change policy, right? They have a goal to address a certain issue, right? So it's not as easy just to go in and say, I'm going to change X, Y, Z. You have to have this data, and you have to conduct all of these tests and experiments to say, well, yes, a select serotonin reuptake inhibitor is or is not going to impact a pilot's performance. You have to have that data to back that up. And I think where we're at right now is just a waiting game. We're waiting for the data to come in. We're exploring to look and see, what we can and can't do, right? So I think we're on the right path. I think we're moving in the right direction, but there's a lot of stuff that's got to be done, and it takes time.
We have a lot to look forward to be honest, right? And that's the truth. Does anybody have a question for the panel? Do not be shy. I know you guys were not shy this entire day.
They're tired and haven't had enough coffee.
Thank you, Mark.
So I think your generation, I've been lucky enough to have interns that are your age too, and I think your generation's so awesome. You're resilient and you're wise beyond your years, which is just so amazing to see. Even when I was here 10 years ago, we wouldn't have been having this conversation, and it's awesome. I love seeing this. So thank you so much for changing the world and for being part of this conversation. My question really is about suicide rates in your generation. Do you find that your generation's less resilient in some ways, maybe because you're talking about mental health so much that it's become kind of extreme, or what do you think is going on with that?
I think there's a very valid point in that. I mean, as we talk about, the internet is of education, but I can also Google my left pinky hurts, and the internet will say, you're gonna die.
WebMD?
Right, yes. So I mean, I think there is a sense of I'm seeing, on the internet that flipped coin of oh, this person's really cool and they talk about having depression. It's cool to have depression. I now have depression. that is, you know, the flip side of it. I also think, and Cal really hit that in the introduction, our generation has also been through a lot before we realized we've been through a lot, you know, and so I think there is also a sense of like, we are going through an incredible, you know, hard time at such a young age. I don't doubt the validity of that our generation has, you know, more diagnoses, it is taking more medication because we grew up post 9/11. We went through a recession. I watched both of my parents lose their jobs. I'm incredibly anxious about this next year because the internet is telling me that that's going to happen again. I'm trying to get a job in the next year. Anyone who's hiring. So I think there is a lot of validity to it as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, there's a graph, right? And there's a point where when is too much, you know, at our fingertips an issue? And is there a point? You know, that question has to be asked also. Is there a point when, you know, we talk about it too much, or we advertise it too much to, you know, like you said, where it's cool. You know, it's cool to be depressed. Clearly that's not the case. I think everybody in this room knows that's not the case. But, you know, whenever you have these outside influences saying, oh, this is cool, how many people, what was the big thing? Was it Tide Pods? Everybody was eating those?
Not the Tide Pods.
So I appreciate you saying that you're dealing with an awesome generation, but understand there are some outliers in that group as well. But no, I think that's a very, very valid point, and it's something that needs to be addressed is when is too much, or is there too much, or should we just be careful and with what we say and how we say it, and make sure we're watching these people on the internet and what they're putting out as well.
I don't want to say the same thing in a different way, but I really agree with what they said, and I think especially online, through social media, people that are lonely or lacking a sense of belonging and they just want to fit in, and they can find these groups and have an overexposure of some of these negative entities that come with the internet and with social media. It can be harmful, and that has impacted our generation in ways.
I think all of you have said, you know, you've been dead on with all of this, and I just want to quickly add, before you move on to the next question, that, you know, the internet is still an evolving thing. You know, we're the first generation that have grown up with the internet, it's like from birth, and you know, we got it from a fire hose, and that's something that I think everyone's still learning to handle. You know, our parents, you know, they're like, this is a new thing to me too. How do I regulate this? And how do I keep, you know, my child, you know, safe as the world keeps changing through the internet? And like a lot of things in life, that's something that we'll just need to keep, you know, working on through generations and generations as, you know, we refine what the internet means to us.
There's a lot of great things that come out of social media, and I'll highlight the creativity of some students and what they're able to create. So when I send an email that's unpopular and I see that I should be on Tucker Carlson with my picture and name and everything there's some pretty amazing memes that come out. And so there's some really creative students, and we love those, by the way. But we also take them with a grain of salt. Okay, now let me caveat that. So there's some also social media areas. So we'll Facebook and LinkedIn, we'll keep with most of the audience out here. Let's talk about the other social media. So TikTok seems to be, I'll call it relatively neutral, right? There's some other social media out there that's anonymous. And I've heard some good things, a few good things. I've heard some extremely negative things on there. And so the question is, I am not on Yik Yak, and that's the one in particular I'm talking about, okay? But there has been some extremely inappropriate remarks made about students, about each other, about just things that, the question is, what is the role of students and student leadership in trying to stop things from spreading that are inappropriate like that? Because if we see it, if I see something that's inappropriate, I'm going to try and take action and stop it, right? But I'm not watching Yik Yak. I'm not seeing what's out there. And so the question is, how do you protect each other? Because that's one in particular where I've seen some pretty bad things on there?
I defer to my, I'm the president of our student council. We have a group of like 6 or 7 freshman gentlemen that come every week. I call them my yahoos. They inform me every week about what's going on Yik Yak. And I think a lot of it comes down to role modeling, what it means to be good on the internet, what it means to be professional, what it means to support each other in a positive way. I think especially when we talk about some of the younger college students, it was the internet that they grew up with at the end of their senior year. It was not, this is how you introduce yourself, this is how you network, this is how you do your resume. It was like TikTok, which I cannot say anything. My TikTok screen time is bad. But I think it does come down to having positive role models that can say, this is okay, this is not okay, or that can model, hey, you can be on Reddit, but you cannot be the bad part of Reddit, and this is how you do the good part. You can be a positive influence. You can post in those group chats. You know, you can say, hey, I see you, I'm in the same boat, this is how I'm dealing with it. But like that other side of it really is, like you said, a knife's edge of like, there is a very dangerous side of it. And I guess for me, it comes down to like a lot of role modeling and teaching, because a lot of that stuff isn't explicitly said. No one wants to say to their kid, like, you're an a-hole. But like, I can say that to another student, and I will say that to other students if they're doing that stuff. So I think it comes down a lot to student leadership.
I think she hit the head saying having good role models, but also leading by example. So, for example, Yik Yak, I actually just deleted that a few months ago because there's a lot of negative stuff on there, and you know, there's no reason to have that energy in my life. You only have so much energy that you can put forward throughout your day, and if I'm putting so much towards an app that's anonymous, it's not worth my time. And so just spreading that message and telling people that, hey, you only have so much energy, so much time, so much commitment that you can put forward. Spend it wisely. You are what you consume, so I really believe that.
Maybe I am the only one who lives under a rock. I've never heard of Yik Yak. Is there anyone else in here that's with me too? Okay, thank you. I'm glad I'm not the only one here. Yeah, clearly I don't want to be a part of it. But, you know, with what you're saying, so I think there's a good 3-prong approach. Take care of yourself, take care of this place, and then take care of others, right? Those are the 3 duties that every single human being should embody. And that's something that we should push, and something we should all try to root in our institutions, both in an educational setting and in a professional setting. And like you said, it is the responsibility of those who have the ability to take action, which many times, Dean, is student leadership. So absolutely, I think it's up to them.
So I also do not have Yik Yak, which is a good thing. And I do also have a few yahoos that will inform me of the events on Yik Yak, to my much dismay. And regarding Yik Yak, and I'd say every other social media platform, there's always going to be people that are just trying to stir up trouble. We have a term for it. They're called trolls. And they live under a bridge because they're trolls. And a lot of the time, people just say stuff because they're bored and want to be entertained. So I've learned to take a lot of it with a grain of salt. Now, with that said, it's still stuff that we need to address. And I think, you know, people like to hide behind, you know, screen, being anonymous. It empowers them. It's much like being in the car and thinking you can get away with road rage. And so people who are also anonymous on Yik Yak need to be able to speak up and say, hey, this is not okay. You know, speak against, you know, the groupthink, where people will agree, hey, I'm gonna get on board with this train of hate and just keep going with it. We need to stop that. And even if we're disliked, it's anonymous. Who cares if people don't like that we're opposing it? You need to be willing to speak up and say, hey, this is not okay. Why are we like this? Like, come on, Gen Z.
I had no clue about Yik Yak until like 2 weeks ago when I heard about it in an Uplift meeting. But yeah, well, we are past the top of the hour, so please give a hand to our panelists in the Collegiate Student Aviation panel.